Hello there, and welcome to Tales of the Force, a place for fans to tell their Star Wars stories. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. This month, I have been specifically highlighting stories of fans that are also wanting to share about their mental health journey. Because of this added personal component, many of these stories might go over the normal episode time. Joining me today is Adam. Adam is 46 years old and a lifelong resident of Green Bay, Wisconsin. After many years in IT, he has returned to college full-time to study web programming. He has gone from being highly suspicious of counseling to being an outspoken advocate for pursuing professional help if needed. Therapy has helped him to let go of the many grudges he has held on to and the anger he has had about things in his youth. He never claims to be perfect, but therapy is helping guide him firmly back to the light side. He has been a Star Wars fan for as long as he can remember. He was 5 when he saw The Empire Strikes Back in theaters. He is also a fan of theme parks and just recently returned from a trip to Walt Disney World. Don't forget, this is Adam's personal story. It is not my place on the show to dismiss, diminish, judge, or have an opinion on his story. Any views, thoughts, or opinions expressed are his own. Any comments on this episode are expected to be respectful. And this episode also comes with a content warning. This is simply to empower you, our listeners, with the knowledge you need to make healthy decisions about how or if you should consume this YouTube channel or podcast content. In this story, there is brief, mature language and also references to depression, anxiety, and the challenges that come with battling those. Not all episodes are for everyone, so if you feel like this episode will be upsetting for you or will offend you in any way, please do not continue. As always, please take care of yourself and reach out to someone you trust if needed. Also, with discussing mental health, I feel like I should say that I, the host, and also the guests are not providing any medical or professional advice on this YouTube channel or podcast. Anything said should not be taken as a replacement for medical, clinical, professional advice, diagnoses, or medical intervention. With all of that out of the way, please join me in welcoming Adam to Tales of the Force. Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited for you to share your story and how you got into Star Wars and all the things. And also, I know you just got back from Galaxy's Edge, so we need to
I
talk about
did.
that too.
I did. I've been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember. I'm an original OG. Well, not original OG because I was, you know, born in 1977, so I was like about 6 years old when Return of the Jedi came out. Came out the summer that I turned 6. I believe. Well, I know I went to see Empire Strikes Back the year before that. It was like in the fall or something like that, right around Christmas time. And I remember being really excited about seeing Return of the Jedi when I was 6. But I don't think I'd seen the first movie until probably, we had home video and stuff like that. I mean, a couple of years later. It was Star Wars for me, the original movie was always like the go-to if I had a sick day from school when I was a kid. It worked me through a lot of like ear infections and sore throats, and it was just like kind of like the ultimate comfort food movie. And I've seen it, so many times. I went in the late 90s to see the re-releases when they came
Mm-hmm.
out. And I went to see the prequels multiple times. I think at least probably 5 times a piece for each one. So I'm very well versed in the movies aspect of it. There's a lot about the extended universe I'm not really familiar with because I haven't read a whole lot of the books, so I don't know what a lot of the really hardcore fan base is talking about when they talk about the extended stuff or the expanded stuff. But I've seen some of the TV shows and everything like that, and it's always been the thing that I guess makes me feel like a kid again. And as I get older, I start looking for those things that, remind me of what it was like to be young. And
Yes.
so I'm one of those guys in their 40s. I watch a lot of the cartoon shows I did when I was a kid. I'm into like Transformers and Voltron and the Thundercats and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
I always thought, as an adult when I was a kid, that you would have to grow out of that stuff. But I'm finding that a lot of people from my generation, at least the coolest ones I know, are all into that. you know, it it didn't used to be that way though. I mean, if you talk about like back when I was a kid, Star Wars came out the year I was born,
Uh-huh.
and it was they stopped really making the toys and stuff like that like a year after I think I was like in probably second or third grade by the time they had stopped really making any of the toys, and it suddenly just became this movie they would show on TV, once every year, like The Wizard of Oz. It wasn't it you know they had the manufacturing empire up to that point, but like there were some years there where it wasn't like today where you could walk into a store and see Star Wars everything. I mean, they got Star Wars cookies and
Yeah.
Star Wars this and that and the other thing, and whatever you can name, they've got a picture of Darth Vader on it, now.
Yeah.
But there
You
was
can
a
get
lot. There
waffle
was
makers.
right. And there was a long time there when it was like kind of the lean years, and during that time, at least from my experience, it stopped being hip to say that you were a Star Wars fan. In fact, in some circles, you'd get bullied for it,
Hmm.
stuff like that, because there was this trope in the media about how people who watched science fiction were incurable nerds, and
Right.
stuff like that. And they'd bash Trekkers, and they'd make fun of this and that and the other thing. And suddenly, when I was probably about 18, when they put out the Faces VHS, and everything all of a sudden was gearing towards the special editions. Now it had once again become cool, and they started selling T-shirts and all the things that they didn't have. For those like probably 10 years, they weren't selling all that stuff. So now as an adult, I have an embarrassingly large collection of Star Wars t-shirts. It's just nuts. I've sort of made up for the fact that I couldn't get some of those things when I was a kid, because now they have them out. I haven't gone so far as to collect action figures or anything like that. I've got a few like Funko Pop dolls and
Yeah.
all that, but I'm not really a huge collector. But as far as the movies and stuff like that, I've got them all on multiple formats, and I still revisit them quite a bit. But my interests have expanded since I was a kid. It was all about, I mean, I remember there was a year when we recorded Empire Strikes Back off of cable. It was probably like 85 or 86 or something like that, and it was a Saturday morning ritual for an entire school year to get up. I had a tape of Empire Strikes Back and Gremlins that was recorded off of cable, and I remember watching that back to back, like on a Saturday morning after cartoons were over, for like an entire year. So it's, in fact, I was thinking about that at Christmas time. I was gonna do the Empire Strikes Back and Gremlins double feature just to remember what it was like.
Oh, that's awesome.
Eventually at some point I will, but I just ran out of time because I didn't have a lot of free time at Christmas, but went back to work shortly after, and then found myself without a job, and now I'm going back to tech school and everything like that. So, but now that I'm in tech school and I'm going full time and stuff like that, I have a little bit more time to rotate some of those things in. So I plan on
Yeah.
reading some of the books and getting a little bit more well versed on some of the expanded literature. I just downloaded that Black Spire book that you had told me about.
It's so
Um,
good.
yeah, I haven't started reading it yet, but I did download it after the trip, and I plan on reading it probably. It's going to be shortly, but I'm in the middle of reading Dune right now, and that's a
Hmm.
big ponderous read. So
Yeah, I haven't
between
done
that,
that yet. I know that's like probably embarrassing to admit that I haven't read Dune, but I have a lot
yeah.
of books to catch up on. Not just Star Wars books, just books in general. So
Oh, Me too, and it's almost embarrassing to say that. Like I sort of became a book hoarder. It's like something new would come out and I'd really want to read it, and then I'd never have time to read it. But it's been sitting on my shelf, so I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I'm still trying to get to read. But I'm hoping that in this year of doing schoolwork and everything like that, and taking time off to do that full time, I have a little bit more time to do some of those things in between classes and like kind of as a study break.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's like a reset balance thing, like learning to incorporate things back in because I think we can get into kind of a grind of everyday life and then if something changes in it, that's when you can kind of reevaluate and go, okay, this is something I'm missing or something I want to add back in and
You're
I think
you're
that's
absolutely yeah, you're absolutely spot on, Jessica. That's, in this last year, I know I've done a lot of personal reevaluation and a lot of personal growth. I've always had, I think I've told you a couple of times before, I've always sort of had high functioning anxiety, and I've been able to mask it for a really long time. And last year, after a job change, things just got really hard for me. I had a couple of nights when I came home from work and I had panic attacks,
yeah.
and I was just, I knew I needed a change, and I wasn't happy with where I was at. And eventually I went to go see my nurse practitioner, and suddenly I found myself in therapy for the first time. And over the last year, um, I feel like I've really grown as a person, but I've also become more aware of, other people who have had the same, who have dealt with the same issues. And so I don't want to, put a badge on myself and call myself a mental health warrior per se, but I do feel that like I want to be an advocate for people
Yeah.
have, who have these issues and don't feel like they can talk about it, because I think it's really important for people to look after their own, not only their own physical health, but your mental health is all part of that too. And you
Mhm.
have to find the strength to admit, when something is not working for you, because when you get in that space and you can't say those things and you can't do those things for yourself, that's when people start harming themselves, or they get into situations where they just don't, they don't have the tools to cope.
Yeah.
um, when I was a kid, I didn't really feel like I had the tools to cope. Growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was basically accepted that, these things are going to happen. Kids are going to pick on you, and you're going to learn to deal with it. And it was never, now there's advocacy against bullying, and there's, people are starting to change their attitudes and all of those things. And there still seems to be a resistance to that change from in
Mhm.
certain circles. It's just like, I think in some areas there's two, I guess, sorts of people on the subject. There's the ones who say, I went through the school of hard knocks, and therefore basically everyone that follows should deal with that because I dealt with it. And then there are people like me who went through that stuff and say, this shouldn't happen to anybody else. you know you shouldn't feel uncomfortable and not included in the world.
Right.
That nobody wants to wake up in the morning and feel like the world doesn't want them there.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, taking your experience and using that to try to help somebody else either be able to deal with something similar in a better way or not have to deal with that at all. Hopefully,
right.
like, and I think mental health things will probably never completely go away, but
Mhm.
I think that's a part of us as humans. But at the same time, I think what can change, like you were saying, is how we deal with that and how we help others and how we shift maybe even like society's viewpoints on things like that. And it doesn't have to be, toughen up, rub some dirt in it,
Right,
and move
right.
on. It can be some comfort and empathy and learning and growth and change. It can be that. And it's
I
yes, it is scary, but we don't have to be afraid of that.
Right, and I think the world would just be a better place if I think people in general were more willing to meet others where they are, and just understand, the things that are going on in their lives, as opposed to just like saying, well, this is my way, and it's my way or the highway. I mean, you can set up appropriate boundaries, but you can still make time for empathy and to see, that, not everybody is going to have the same situation that you
Yeah.
have, and and recognize your privilege. I
Yeah.
recognize my privilege in that, I have a safety net to help me out. Because there's some folks who, if they got fired from their job or whatever, they'd be, out on the street. you know I recognize my privilege there, and I just, there's I think some people just need to let go of, some of society's standards. I think they're just outdated. you
Yeah.
know it's just the
Yeah.
way it's the way it is. When I was younger, it was really hard for me to laugh at myself because I had been through a lot of that stuff. I never really learned to laugh at it. And now I'm feeling comfortable enough to like let my geek flag fly, you know, and just be myself. And if people,
Same.
if people don't like it, tough luck, it's their loss, But
Yeah.
I told my therapist this. I try to be kinder and nicer to people just generally in public. A lot of, just please and thank you, and especially to service workers, because they're doing a heck of a job out there, and they're, they put up with a lot of crap. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just,
Yes.
but yeah, yeah.
I
But
feel that. Yeah. I mean, I hid being a Star Wars fan for a long time because, once I was a teenager, I was already kind of different than the group that I grew up around. And so I felt like I already kind of had a target on my back because I liked things that most people around me didn't, or they,
mhm,
not that they thought maybe it was bad, but it wasn't like what you're supposed to focus on or different things like that. And so, um, I think I did hide a part of myself because one, I was a girl, and that was already kind of weird for a girl to like Star Wars. And two, I already felt different. So I didn't want to add more things, to make me feel more different than other people. And so
mhm,
I have gone through times when I've definitely masked things and tried to be okay, or try to present myself in a certain way because I felt like either one, that's socially how I was supposed to be, or it was just I'm doing this to get by to the next day. I mean,
mhm,
like you, I've dealt with anxiety too. And a lot of that stemmed from being undiagnosed with ADHD my entire life. And so I probably felt different also because my brain worked different and I didn't really know that. And so it was stressful to feel like something just wasn't clicking ever, and it's just because I didn't know what was going on with my brain. And so, I've been diagnosed with all kinds of different things and have tried all kinds of different medication because we thought it was something else. And um so I really feel that and I validate that feeling is what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to get
oh,
at
well,
is
thank you.
um yeah.
I'm thrilled to be here because I really appreciate the fact that you've tried to create an inclusive environment where everybody feels welcome. And like when I saw your first post about, starting this project up, um I felt the same way about just being in the Star Wars fandom and stuff like that. Like, I mean, even though I've been around for a long time, and I've been into the movies for a while, it seems like there's I'm was still trying to figure out if there was still a spot for me in the actual fandom, to be. I mean, it's one thing to like wear the t-shirts and tell your friends about it and stuff like that. It's another thing to participate in the online communities, especially when there's this aggravating type of meme that's that goes around where especially on Reddit, where it's so toxic. There's this prevailing attitude. Yeah, I was on Reddit for a while too, and I deleted my Reddit account because I just can't with those people. I
We
just
just
they're
sometimes you have to do the things that are helpful for you. Like I went through a
right,
period of time that I had to delete, not that news and knowing what's going on in the world isn't an important thing, but I had to delete all the news apps off my phone because like it just was triggering everything for me. Like I just would sit in bed and like read headline after headline of like horrible things that are going on. And like you were saying, that safety net, like it took my husband coming to me and saying, I think this is a problem. I don't think this
right.
is a good place for you right now. Like, let's take a break. And so that's really great that you were able to see that and you were able to set, a healthy boundary for yourself and say, this isn't the place for me.
Right, and the thing is, I mean, even just that was the thing that it's disappointing too, because I remember, probably about 25. Well, it's almost going on like 30 years now that we've had the internet. I mean, I think we got it in like 97 when the special editions came out, and I remember the prospect of it was so exciting
Hmm.
because you could connect with anybody in the world and you could do anything. And suddenly I found out, later on, that there were a lot of people that were just there to disrupt things, and they're there um to cause trouble, and to, they think that their opinion is the only thing. And the thing that really aggravated me, like I was saying before, on Reddit, is I guess it's sort of a meme, because people keep doing this um in many spots. It's always somebody posts a take and they say, can't we just all agree that this? And it's like, no, there I don't know how many billion people in the world. We are not just going to all agree on that, you know. And the thing is, you can't. Everybody's entitled to their opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts.
Yeah.
And you can't create a fact out of it and say, well, the Last Jedi sucks, or this or that or the other thing, and
It
all
might
that.
have sucked for
It's there's
you, but it doesn't mean
right,
it
right,
sucked
right.
for everybody.
Right, and then they make it right, and the thing is, then they make a list of reasons why you should not like this or whatever, and it's like, really,
Yeah.
you're presuming to tell me. I mean, there's if some of the pickier people went through my personal movie collection or whatever, they'd go through and they'd say, why do you like that movie, or why do you like this or that or the other thing? I mean, I admit there are some movies in my collection outside of Star Wars that are objectively bad, but they're enjoyable for me. I mean,
Right.
you know, I could watch. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Cool as Ice, but it's okay. Cool
I
as
actually
Ice is a
haven't.
yeah. Cool as Ice is a film from the early '90s. It was Vanilla Ice in his like one and only acting role, and they made this film. It was supposed to be like kind of a cheap exploitation thing to try to ride the bandwagon and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it ended up coming out like 6 months after he was disgraced, and after they found out that his biographer had made up his story and all that, and people were like quit listening to him and stuff, and they quit playing him on the radio.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm exaggerating here, but like 12 people went to see it when it came out, and it made like $600 on opening weekend and then went away. But it sort of became a cult classic for
Yeah.
people like me who grew up for like with Vanilla Ice. It's a ridiculously stupid movie on a lot of points. I mean, the people in it, the characters do some really dumb things that you would never see in real life, but yet it's for me it's one of those things where I could put it on and just laugh out loud for an hour and a half. And for
Yeah.
me, that's what entertainment is about. You
Hmm.
know, you can find ways to laugh at even the silly stuff that people criticized in the prequels, and stuff like that. I love Jar Jar. I thought he was
I
super
do too.
funny. a lot of people thought he was really dumb, and they were like, "Well, this movie, Anakin's a whiner and this and that and the other thing," and they got uh these really harsh criticisms of things or whatever. And my question to those people is like, but does it make you feel like you were 8 years old again? Because I feel like that's who the movies are made for. Is they're
Yeah.
made for kids of all ages that never lost that, like, the impulse to try to, make themselves feel like a kid again.
Yeah.
Because that's what going to Disney World is all about. It's what all that nostalgia is all about. We
Right.
can have we can have responsibilities and stuff like that, but they wouldn't sell all those toys to adults and all these things to people if it didn't, like, satisfy that warm and fuzzy feeling of like shutting off the outside world and just living, being mindful and living in the moment and enjoying the things you did when you were younger.
Right, and
It's
taking a break from the harsh realities of life, right? Like,
right,
it's an escape, and that's what art is sometimes. Like, sometimes art is
right.
also reflective or is making you think or challenging the status quo or something, but a lot of times it's about an escape, and it's about a break from reality. And have you been to Galaxy's Edge before this trip?
I did. I was there last year, just around this time, for the first time, and
And how
it
was
was
that? What was it like walking through that entrance for the first time?
well, for the very first time, it was weird. And the reason it was weird is because, well, first of all, I'm I'm in my 40s now. I remember going to Star Tours when it was new, and having it be a revolutionary, brand new thing. It was one of the most popular things at Disney World when I was there, and the lines were ridiculously long for it. And that was like when I was 13. It was brand new, and I remember just walking around that corner, past there, and walking through this gate, and they tell you where it is and all that stuff, but it's such an immersive experience that, if you've never been there before, you might not know that you're walking through this cement arch and you're actually going into Galaxy's Edge, and you see this badge up there, but it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen in the movies. And you walk through the gate, and suddenly you're there,
Mhm.
and you walk around the corner, and there's gun turrets leading into Rise of the Resistance, and then you walk around another corner, and there's the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy right there. And I was stupefied.
Right?
It was just like, I was like, this is my 8-year-old imagination that's still there in my 40s was going berserk. I
Oh,
just
I
I
cried. I'm not even
I
gonna be ashamed. Like
Right, right. And I just but yeah, I went there. I was there during spring break last year. The lines were really long. I ended up buying my parents and myself tickets to get on Rise of the Resistance, just
Mhm.
so we could get on the ride, because they were having like 3-hour wait times to get on. It was just
Crazy.
it was crazy. Um and we had
But I
we had a
would do it. I
blast.
would wait 3 hours for that ride. It's so
Oh yeah,
fun.
we had a blast. This time we went, and it's after spring break. The traffic was quite a bit less. I mean, I don't think I saw more than like a 90-minute wait time on that ride, but I didn't actually experience it because uh um I bought a couple of individual lightning lanes, and we jumped in standby. We rope dropped it like the first ride,
Mhm.
um one day when we were there at Hollywood, and it was still a mind-blowing experience. I mean, I went on it a couple of times when I was there the last time, but I went on it 6 times this time, and it was still, every time I rode the ride, I had to take a mugshot of myself looking really angry that I just got I just got arrested by the first order again. But those people, it's funny, depending on what day you ride it and who you ride it with.
Right.
Some of the people that arrest you and they put you in the cells or whatever are very serious about it. It's a hilarious and just fun and exciting experience, and I've it's now my theme park attraction of all time, just because of how
It's so
immersive it is.
good. And
It
it
feels
does depend on who you're with too. And one of my friends, she would not care if I shared this story without asking. She wouldn't care. But when we wrote it for the first time, I have a friend that's hilarious and she loves like messing with people. And
Mhm,
so the she was in the front, which was perfect, like in our waiting like line of, they capture you and you're in like the ship, and there's all those like lights and buttons on the wall
mhm.
of like the ship that you're in. And she was in the front of our group, which again was perfect because she was the one that was getting like harassed the most by the first order officer. And she was like the next to the wall. And so she just like reaches over and they're like, don't touch that. And she's like, what? This? And like the
Yeah,
button, and they're like, whatever, like spy or resistant, whatever,
right.
they're yelling at you. And
Resistance
she's like,
scum.
yeah. And they're like, I know you couldn't follow orders if and they're just going off on her. And she is just going back and forth, like literally pushing all the buttons. And we are dying laughing. Like all of us are laughing so hard because, and like even other groups are turning around and watching this. Like you could not have written it in a script better. It was so perfect. It was absolutely hilarious. And so now when I went back, like that's all I could think about was like my friend pushing the buttons when she was told like not to push them. Like it's just so fun.
Well, I got into it actually, not necessarily doing that, but I got into a verbal exchange actually with one of the arresting officers when my I was on I went on a couple of times completely by myself, but I went on one time with my niece and my sister and brother-in-law, and we we were in line. They had brought us into the detention area, and we were in the front row, like right in front of the officer, and they start looking up and down the rows, and they said, "One of you is a spy. Who is it?" And all that stuff. And I pointed at my 8-year-old niece, and I was like, "She's the spy." And
She's
they're like, "Oh," they're like, "So you're willing to sell out a child?" And stuff like that. And I'm like, she's the spy. She's the spy. Bother her about it. And they're like, how do we know it's not you? It was a really funny experience. Um, and then I had a really funny experience on one of the times I rode Star Tours too, because of course I had to ride that multiple times too because they got new adventures on it now. They've got
yes.
Ahsoka's on there, and they have Mando and Grogu are on there, and Cassian Andor. And I had to laugh because one of the times I went on there completely by well, not completely by myself, but outside of my
With
group,
your group,
I
yeah.
yeah, without my group, I went on went in, and the guy must have been the attendant must have been like a failed stand-up comedian or something like that, because he did like a 5-minute stand-up comedy thing while he was showing everybody how to do the safety belts and stuff. And it was one of the I can't remember exactly what was said, but I just remember laughing out loud and at the whole thing. And then he's like, at the end, he shuts the doors. He's like, have a nice trip. I hope you make it back. And
And
stuff
you're like,
like that. I
oh
was
no,
just
what's gonna
well,
happen?
that was there was the standard thing, because like most of the time people just like go through the script and they say, like, um is it may the force be with you, because I certainly will not, and stuff like. I heard that
Yes.
times, but the guy that was doing the stand up was just hilarious. It was so funny, and it was just, I don't know. I just kind of wondered if this guy wasn't like an aspired stand up comedian or something like that just like got relegated to working at Disney World. And then and it was kind of the same thing when I went to there was another show uh at Hollywood. It was they have a Mickey Mouse cartoon that you can sit down and watch in a theater. And I
Uh-huh.
was sitting in there, and there's this the woman that was about to put on the cartoon or whatever was telling these just really corny like riddle jokes or whatever. It was just really funny. And then
You're
finally
like,
She's like, I'm gonna be here all day, and stuff like that.
You're like, do you
Okay,
work at Jungle? Do you work at the Jungle Cruise like on other days?
yes.
Like, is this your off day from that?
Oh, it was fun, but the thing I really appreciated, number one, was that the crowds were a lot lighter this year than they were the last year. I mean, there were a couple of days in the midweek where it was a little lighter, and then it picked up on the weekend. But one thing I noticed from everybody, and I posted this on my threads. Um, I've never gone on vacation anywhere else where I've gotten a better like customer service
Hmm.
experience. And I know the more cynical people out there are going to say, "Well, you're just a shill for Disney, you're doing this or whatever." It's no. When when you're, especially when you're paying that much money or whatever,
Yeah.
obviously you want to be able to go there and, people are just nice to you. And I saw nothing but smiles from the staff members, and they were just all just super. Even when they're goofing around about like having you arrested by the first order and stuff like that, it was kind of funny that last day that I was at Epcot by myself. I'm roaming around, and I brought a couple of Star Wars t-shirts to wear in the Galaxy's Edge, and the last day I was wearing a Britney Spears t-shirt. I'm walking around Epcot, and the number of cast members who said they loved Britney Spears was just unbelievable. It was like I got no comments on my Star Wars gear when I was there, because obviously everybody's wearing it. I mean, I saw dudes.
Unless
I
you
saw
wear a shirt that says Kylo on it.
Right, right. See, I was
Oh
I
man, I got harassed, man.
really?
Like,
Yeah.
not, I don't mean that like in a bad way, but like
Hmm.
I was like on cloud nine because the stormtroopers were even nice to me. Like everyone was like talking about how they liked my shirt. And
Hmm.
then at night I ran into Vi and Ray. Let me tell you. I'm standing there like this, like I have a sling bag on, and I'm like trying to like kind of cover like the big Kylo letters on my shirt. And the cast member playing Vi was perfect. Perfect. Like I was scared. Like she looked at me and she goes, "Uh, what does your shirt say?" And I was like, nothing." And she was like, "Does it say Kylo?" And I was like, "Uh, maybe." The amount of sass and like, oh my gosh. And then my mind, because I don't think very well like on the spot sometimes, because later I thought I should have just said I was a spy and I was wearing it like trying to blend in or something. And she was, I go, well, I mean, everybody can change. And, we don't know because like we know the story, but they can't act like they know what happens like next, And so I'm like, people can change. And I look at Ray and I'm like, right, Ray, right? Like trying to get
Hmm.
some sympathy. And she's like, yeah. And then Vi looks at me and is like, the whole redemption thing is her thing. I think you're inflating his ego. I mean, just was like, and I was just like, note to self,
And
never wear a Kylo anything to Galaxy's Edge if you're gonna run into like Vi, because she is not gonna stand it. And I looked at my friend who's with me, and she even threw me under the bus. She's like, I'm not wearing it anything. Like, do you see anything on my shirt that's for the first order? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. And I had like read the book and I was like so excited. Like I literally was like, Vi, like I was so excited to see her. And then I just got schooled. I just got completely schooled. It was great.
oh, that's hilarious. That's so funny. That is so funny. I it's I have a funny story about my picture that I sent too. I had thought the entire time, a lot of kids are interested in meeting Mickey and Minnie and all that stuff, and they want to meet Anna and Elsa and Mary Poppins and all that stuff. I'm like, I want to run in with a Wookiee, and I hope I see Chewbacca this time, because the last time I saw him roaming around with Ray, but I didn't get. I got like a
Yeah,
picture of them
same.
working together, but I didn't get a picture with him, and and I just happened to see him standing talking to another little kid that was sitting over there. He was little boy, must have been probably about 5 or 6 years old. And after he left, I just snapped a couple of pics with Chewbacca, and I got a selfie with him photobombing me. And pretty soon, I had a Wookiee's arm wrapped around me, and it was the cutest moment. It was just like I mean, I realize it's in reality, it's a guy in a suit, right? But
Right.
he's a character that you loved so well, so much when you were a kid, and you always like wanted to meet a Wookiee in real life, and stuff like that. And so it was just really funny, and I love the fact that they like actually have the sound effects and stuff like that that make him sound like he's like actually talking to you and stuff like
Yes,
that. So I'm like,
yes, and
I'm like,
I
thanks, Chewie, you know, thanks,
I
Chewie, and he's
love it.
roar, roar, it's
Like,
great.
it's just I love how they obviously, and they obviously give more attention to the kids if, if push came down to shove, like, they're gonna do that,
Mm-hmm.
but I love how you can tell that I don't know if it's, like, a training or what, but they can tell when adults are huge fans and, like, the kid in you gets excited because I don't feel like they treat you any different when you're really excited to see a character. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool. It's like they notice and they'll come over. I got to see Chewy and like get a selfie with him, and I hadn't the other time that I went either. He was like on a mission doing stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we like my friend and I like screamed. We were like, Chewy, like we were so excited. And he came over to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like it's like the kid in you again, like with Star Wars. It's so great. Like it's almost like healing in a way, especially if you either one didn't which wasn't the case for me, but I know some people feel like they can't like Star Wars when they were growing up,
Mm-hmm.
or with like my case, like you hide it because you feel like you can't express that you like it. And so to kind of get to, I don't know, have that fun that you wanted to have as a kid with the characters and things that aren't even real is just like it's so great and it's so healing on I don't know how to describe it, but it's like you almost lose yourself for a second and think that it's real. Like it's just I can't it's an experience that it's like you try to explain with going there, especially if you love Star Wars, that you it's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it.
Right, and that's exactly how I feel about it too. And even in the other parks too. It's my niece wanted to meet Ariel, and she met Ariel in the Magic Kingdom, and it was a really sweet moment. They took some pictures, and this actress who was playing Ariel was, I mean, obviously it's a human being playing an animated character, but I mean it's meant to take you out of the real world. It's
Right.
not you're not meeting somebody in an Ariel costume. You're meeting them,
Right.
and so they talk to you complete. They never break character. They
Yeah.
always, it's always you stay in character. You put on. I don't watch too much professional wrestling, but it's kind of like that, where
Yeah.
it's when you would see the characters, and stuff like that. Obviously, these are real people playing these characters, but when they're putting on a show like that or whatever, they never break. It's always, these guys may be best buds and having beers afterwards after the show, but on stage they absolutely hate each other.
Right.
It's all about the immersion. There's most of me that absolutely loves that. I think it's so awesome. But there's this part of me that the part of me that's still a little bit cynical about the world and stuff like that, that sees that and it's like that's scary. I mean, the thing that's scary about it is that the level of immersion is so real. It's so powerful to take you out of the real world or whatever. It's
Mhm.
it's a good thing that they're doing this for good and not for
Yeah.
evil, because it's
Right.
it's meant for entertainment purposes, and we all know. I mean, anybody who has a firm sense of fantasy to reality knows this is not real, you know, but they make the fantasy so real at the
Right.
time and so convincing.
You were talking earlier about like the internet and that kind of is even a thing with social media. Like it can be so easy for people to portray something that's not real or be like a fake version of themselves. And I don't know if everybody does it with like a bad intent, but it's like one of those things that like you have to remember that certain things aren't real. And it's really easy to make something appear like something else. I mean, not somebody that's ever going to be like, technology, all of technology is bad or all of the internet is bad, because I think there are definitely really good things that can be done with it and can be used with the internet and technology. But there is a flip side to it. And there is like bad things too that can be done. And
Right.
it, it's interesting because I mean, even when it comes to like the Star Wars movies and the shows, to see how far technology has come from when it started and like where it
Mhm.
is now, and how people can use like all kinds of things to create something. And if, an actor still wants to play a character 30 years down the road, they can do de-aging and they can like like it's just it's
Yeah.
insane. And yes, there is like a scary component to it, but there's also like, so it's also cool.
Right, as long as it's done in the service of good storytelling and they're not using it to hurt people or whatever, I don't see a problem with it, really.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
that's what storytelling is about. It's always been about, trying to immerse people in the experience of being there and hopefully make them feel like they can imagine themselves as part of it. And that for me is the real appeal to Galaxy's Edge, is being able to visit this place. Obviously, it's not, the spaceships are not real. It's all animatronics and stuff like that, but they do a brilliant job of actually putting on the show, that it feels like you can finally be part of the show. And you can roam around to these markets and take a look at these like really ornate, nothing's there for purchase, the wood carvings and stuff like that they have of the porgs and Chewbacca's head and stuff. And I don't know if you went into the lightsaber shop, but they have a disintegrated Darth Vader helmet. It looks exactly like the one that Kylo Ren had in Force Awakens. And I didn't see that the last time, and I took like several angled pictures of it. I probably looked like the biggest nerd, but then I realized that other big nerds probably also did the same thing. I walked through Galaxy's Edge and I must have seen like a half a dozen guys wearing like full on Jedi robes in like 90-degree weather. And at that time, I'm like, I respect all of your like your dedication to this, but I couldn't, even as nerdy as I am about this, I couldn't like risk getting heat stroke walking around in those big robes or whatever and stuff. It might be fun in January when it's only like 40 degrees out, but it's, not when it's 90. But
I know,
yeah,
it can be
and
so hot. It's so
it,
hot, and, like, you're waiting in line sometimes, like, it's so smart how they've even started to engineer rides with the thought process of people waiting in the heat. Like now
mhm.
you wait some, and like you can tell with the newer rides versus the older rides that like part of your line now is like inside something,
Mhm.
and so it makes it part of an experience. And then when you're waiting for Smuggler's Run, like you can even buy drinks like in line while you're waiting. And it's like so brilliant
Wow.
because one, who doesn't, while you're waiting in a long line, who doesn't want a soda or a beer or something like while you're waiting, depending on, what kind of beverages you like. And it's hot. And that is an easy way for them to make money too. Like it's smart all around because
Right.
you're in line waiting, you're bored, it's hot. Like I'm going to buy, probably, even if you go in and you're like, maybe we're not gonna do this, that, or another, but I guarantee you more people are gonna buy a drink waiting in line when it's hot. It's just smart, and the fact that they think about all those things, and I don't know, it's a really cool experience and something that
Well,
I'm glad
yeah,
exists and exists for fans of all ages because it's just such a really good immersive experience and I don't know, just like fun and like you said, it
yeah.
just kind of gives you a break a little bit. Do you feel like Star Wars and going to things like that or just watching the movies kind of helps like almost refresh you in a way to like deal with the real world?
Certainly, and I have a personal story to tell about that too. I'm not going to get too far into negativity here, but I do have to tell a story um, about sort of the experience like that. At one of my previous jobs, I had a coworker who was very very into his job, and it's I'm not knocking people who are into their job, but eventually at some point you have to you have to be able to take off your professional hat and put on your stress relief hat, try to get yourself out of feeling like you're burnt out all the time. And I had a coworker who, after having seen The Last Jedi, started one time giving me a rundown about why this movie is relevant to their job. And I had to tell him at one point, I'm like, I I respect that you like your job and all of those things, but this is not what going to the movies for me is about. Going to the movies for me is all about the magic. And it's not, even when you go see something that's serious, that's like, I mean, maybe seeing a movie like The Godfather isn't about the magic, but it's about seeing a story, it's about seeing acting and a way to take myself out of the world for a while and shut my phone off and and live in someone else's world for a while, just to to be there. I don't remember exactly what George Lucas said at the end of I've seen From Star Wars to Jedi, the making of a saga, so many times, but I remember the very last comment in there is he said something to the effect that, as attractive as the Star Wars world is, eventually at some point you have to go home and do something different. And he said
Yeah.
this as he's the voiceover as he's getting on an airplane. And so what he's saying, I think for me is it means, obviously he's trying to make a playground for himself, but yet there is a real world to live in, and we have to sometimes move on to the next thing or whatever. But on the flip side of it, I guess what I'm trying to say is when I go to the movies, I go to live in somebody else's world. I don't go to live in mine, and I don't care to hear about stuff that is affecting my job when I'm there. I bought a ticket to see something and to be taken someplace that I can't go in real life, and to experience things that other people have creatively done. It's interesting to see that from that perspective, but at the same time it's like seriously, I don't understand why you would want to be that obsessive about like the real world when you can leave that all behind and forget about that stuff and just have some fun for a while. Because that's, for me, that's what it's about. It's about the fun. And if it wasn't fun anymore, then I wouldn't do it.
Right.
There's
Right.
but
Right.
it's that's what it's about. I was thinking about this. I was sitting in my resort room, and I was thinking about some of the things that I would say on this show, because I knew that this was coming up, and I was really excited about talking, not only about my mental health advocacy, but about the trip there, and about my history with the movies and everything like that. And I was thinking about something I mentioned before about the seductive power of being in a world that completely allows you to shut yourself off from reality. And the Disney experience, especially if you're staying on resort, is all about that. I mean, it's, obviously everything has a cost. You still have to pay money to buy things, and there's a
Right.
world
Yeah.
economics that's there. But it's all about putting on this customer service experience and putting on a show for people that when they go home or whatever, it creates like a literal shock to the system when you get back and you realize, I'm so glad to not have to sit in an airport terminal coming home. But
The Disney
I,
fatigue, right?
it's, yeah, it's the Disney fatigue. I've been to places where I was happy to be home, but when you get home, your legs are not hurting from your hips all the way down to your quads from walking all over the place. I don't walk around in my city that much, because I have a car and I drive around. It's to get from one place to the next. To get from the gate, you hop on the Skyliner from Barbados at the Caribbean beach, and you take that all the way to Epcot, and you walk in at the World Showcase gate, and you're going all the way to Spaceship Earth. That's a long walk,
Yeah, it's a
and
lot. It's a lot.
yeah. And it's and then to get back too, because that's where the main parking lot is. You got some people that are coming in from the main parking lot. They came in off the highway and they're going all the way back to see the American experience, like at the exact opposite end of the pond. That's a long walk, and to walk around the world and do all that stuff. But it was fun. I got to do, outside of the Star Wars thing, I got to do a lot of stuff I didn't do on the last trip just because the wait times were so long. Finally got on the Frozen ride, like the third time. This is my third trip that ride was in existence, and I wanted to get on it when I was there the weekend that I was there for a conference, and it was like a 90-minute wait time. I'm like, yeah, forget this. There's other stuff to do, and didn't do it the last time. And I finally I sprung for Genie that last day, and I was at Epcot, and it was cute. It was hilarious, and I loved it. But I gotta make one shout out here also to another experience that I absolutely love at the Magic Kingdom, completely outside of the Star Wars thing. It's a movie that plays in there. It's like right next to It's a Small World, and it's called Magic. And it's
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
funny. It's my favorite Donald Duck cartoon of all time. Like they advertise it as a Mickey Mouse experience, but it's a Donald Duck cartoon. And if you've never seen this before, you gotta see it. And especially if you're a fan of like the Disney Renaissance movies that came out from like The Little Mermaid to now, you know, they sing like major songs from it. And the hilarious parts for me is like when he's like flirting with Ariel, stuff like that, and making goo goo eyes at her. And then the other part is when Princess Jasmine at the very end, just before coming back to the real world, Princess Jasmine puts the sorcerer's hat on his head and he says thank you, and then Iago comes and flies away with it and stuff like that. I've seen Aladdin so many times and all that stuff, and I love how they twisted those classic moments like that to be about Donald Duck. It was hilarious. I love
Because
that.
I mean,
And
he
it
has
was
to have
funny.
stuff about him.
Right. And it was so funny too, because I showed it to my niece who is almost 8 years old. And it was just me and her were sitting in the theater the one time I took her in there. And as soon as Simba comes out and his head's popping out in 3D or whatever, she actually leaned into me and like tried to cover her eyes because she was like kind of she was kind of spooked by it. But it was just so much fun.
It
And
seems real. It's crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
it's so
and
fun. It's yeah. I mean, it. Yes, it is. Like I've talked about before, like how things being expensive is like relative to like every person and like what you spend your money on and what's important to you. But I do think like there's definitely value in if it's your thing going to Disney, like even if it's expensive and going to Galaxy's Edge, like it's an experience and you are paying for an experience and you are paying for, like you said, like a little bit of a break from reality. And so you
right.
can't really quantify that. Really, that's different for each person. So
Right. And the thing is, I mean, like going to the movies, you're doing it for like 2 hours, but when you go there, you're paying to be there, and they do an exceedingly good job at it. You know,
Yeah.
I've been to other theme parks. I went to Universal for a couple of hours one night when I was there for a conference, and they rented the place out like after hours for about 3-4
Yeah.
hours, and really, it's kind of cool. I went on the Mummy ride. I had a good time. The Simpsons ride made me sick because of if you've ever been on that, you know, they make it look like you're going like 200 miles an hour down on like a 90-degree drop, and I couldn't handle it. But and that did me in for the rest of the night. After that, I was like, that was still when I was um inclined to have a beer once in a while. Now I'm sober, but I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just gonna have a beer and be over with it. Um but yeah,
And then it
just
doesn't always make you even feel any better
right, right,
anyway.
right. No, I was roaming around looking at like all the set stuff and taking pictures and stuff like that for the rest of the time. Um, but I just no Disney parks do it for me because number one, their roller coasters are the most fun of anything I've ever been on. They're not that aggressive. It's not like going to Great America for me in outside of Chicago is a uh like basically a used to good thing. I was there like probably about like 10 years ago, and I couldn't do it anymore. I went on Raging Bull and I went on Iron Wolf and a couple of the other coasters or whatever, and eventually I'm like, I was in my 30s at the time. I'm like, I can't do what I used to do in my teens. But the Disney stuff is done with the family in mind. Even like,
They seems like smoother too. Even some of the bigger rides, like
oh yeah.
they're not as like jerky. I don't know how to. Rise of the Resistance is so smooth. Like you
Hmm.
don't, like you are moving like in similar motions, but it's not. It's just smoother. Like I don't know how to describe it. It's like the technology has just come so
the
far,
the
and they
trackless
pay attention to those little things.
Yeah, that trackless car technology to me is a technical marvel. I've been watching some of those shows that are on Disney Plus, the like behind the attraction thing.
Mm-hmm.
This afternoon, I was taking a study break from school stuff, and I watched the one on the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, and I'd seen that a couple of times, and it's to me that stuff is awesome. I wish they would do after enough people have seen Rise of the Resistance, I wish they would do one where they show exactly how that stuff works. Because it's just, to me, even being a technologically minded person working in IT and understanding computer logic and things like that, it's extraordinary to me to see the amount of stuff that actually goes into making a ride like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So
Um,
much programming and all kinds of stuff. I bet they'll have to wait until like if any of the process or any of that part of that ride has like I'm
Patents
sure it
on it,
has
and
patents and all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure they'll wait until like all of that runs out so that somebody else can't do something similar, but I would assume they would do a behind the scenes on those rides at some point because they are just so cool. Like
oh,
so
it's
cool.
another one of my absolute favorites, and then also another one where most of the waiting area is indoors, is the Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. I'm a huge fan of that ride. I went on it 3 times the last time I was there, and 3 times this time. And I took my niece on it. She hadn't been on there the last ride, and she absolutely loved it. In fact, she was like, "Can we do this again?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're not letting anybody else in the queue because it's too brand new yet." So, and we went on it at the very end of the day. So we only got to do it once together, but um, I just the not just the rides, but the pre-shows and stuff like that are so thought out. There's I don't know if you've been on the ride, but they have this really funny opening bit with Terry Crews when you go on there, and he's welcoming everybody to this to the thing, and he's welcome Epcoters, Epcotians. What do they call you people anyway? And somebody shouts out, alcoholics. He said,
That's
"Welcome,
hilarious.
Epcot Terrans," and then you go on the actual ride itself, and there's like somebody said something about like you people are doomed, or it was like, oh the main villain, I forget what his name is, says you people are doomed or something like that, and you look over and there's Rocket up in the corner and he's nodding his head. It's just, yeah, it's just one of those funny moments. I love those movies. They're so much fun. And
Yes.
the ride really, I love the ride because number one, they've got great music on it, and number two, and music is such a really important part of my life. But number two, they captured the personality and the spirit of those characters so well that they made it, it's like you're again, you're part of a movie. It's super
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. So going to, Disney and Galaxy's Edge and different things like that, how do you think that helps you in the real world when you come back? Just like immersing yourself in a Star Wars movie or something that gives you a little bit of a break. Like, how does that help you with just life or in specifics like anxiety or different things?
It's I mean it, obviously it's a release. I needed it, a break from the real world. I went through, I mean, in the last couple of years, I went through a period there where I had a nervous breakdown. Started with anxiety treatment just before I went to Disney World last year, and it was, before I had even entered therapy or any of that stuff. It allowed me a break from that the constant stress that I felt like I was under.
Yeah.
So it's part of it too. I mean, I realize, sometimes going on those big vacations and standing in crowds can be stressful for people and stuff like that. But it was just good to be able to like shut everything off, for a while, and be just live in the moment. And for me, that mindfulness is part of, I guess, coaxing yourself out of those panic situations where you feel like,
Yeah.
where you feel like you're not living up to somebody else's standards, or you're not, all of this stuff. None of that stuff seems to matter when you're gone, and that's, when you're on those trips or whatever. It doesn't matter until you come home and pay the bills, right? So
Yeah.
it's, but I think that's one of the things that helps really. But I'm just I feel personally so lucky to have a good, not only a good support system, a good family to help me out, and to accept the fact that, I'm not always 100%, and stuff like that. And there are some days when I just don't feel like doing anything, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to get back to that sociable thing that I used to do when I was younger. I mean, I used to be a lot more sociable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm finally getting back to feeling comfortable in my own skin and feeling like the world wants me here, and stuff like that. I mean, it's weird. It's weird to say that, but it's like, you know, I've never had anybody in my family tell me some of the things that other people who's have been through this have said. I mean, there's a lot of negativity that comes from anxiety and all of those. I'm actually reading a book right now that's called the Man They Wanted Me to Be, and it's about toxic masculinity and about how this guy grew up in a family that the author grew up in a family that didn't teach their boys to show any emotions, and the only
Hmm.
emotion that was like acceptable there was anger.
Right.
And if you showed any fear, or if you showed any kind of self-doubt or anything like that, you were not a man. you know and you have to basically give up your man card if you're not like one of these like beer swilling racist homophobes, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. If you show any kind of acceptance to anything outside of your world,
Your normal life.
right, it's frowned upon in some communities. I've never been in that situation, but I've certainly been in spots where like um I felt like I wasn't appreciated. I will admit I'm a recovering people pleaser. Okay, I
Hey,
used to
I am too.
when I was a child, I was averse to conflict so much that the idea of, you know, disappointing people and stuff like that terrified me. But the thing is, you know, it's really weird because like most people that go through that a situation like that would be afraid of like getting bad grades in school. And for me, it was
Yeah.
just being afraid of getting into disciplinary stuff. Like I was a terrible student when I was in high school. I got really bad grades. I just wasn't motivated. Part of it, I think, was, you know, I don't want to blame the teachers at all of it, but it's a lot of the teachers I had in high school weren't passionate about the material. They were just bored and they bored the kids.
Yeah, they could have
But
been burnt out too.
yeah. And it's, you know, I could go on for another hour about like, you know, about stuff that I feel like I'm learning to appreciate now that I didn't appreciate when I was younger, that I'm starting to get interested in just because I kind of want to, like, before I went to Disney, just before this, I watched a couple of movies and started reading some things that like I sort of felt like I missed out on when I was in school because I read the
Mhm.
cliff notes instead of like actually paying attention. And now I feel like at some point I want to go back and kind of read my high school syllabus again so I can like appreciate these books for what they were. Because it's one thing I think about education, and I feel like in some schools they teach kids to be like hyper analytical about things
Mhm.
and not necessarily teach people how to love reading. And I feel like that's like they're teaching you how to like recognize the themes and things or whatever and stuff like that, but they don't teach you to like actually do it for the pleasure of doing it. And now I'm finally getting into this where I feel like I'm, you know, I want to learn more about like some of the stuff I, you know, should have paid more attention to in school when I was younger, just because now I have this thirst for information and wanting to know
Yeah.
more and stuff, and try to make myself a more well-rounded and more well-read individual. Because I feel like, you know, you can immerse yourself in one, you know, fictional universe only so much. And eventually at some point, you know, if you want to be, if you're like me and you want to be culturally literate on a lot of other stuff, you sometimes have to take a break and you read, you know, other things or you do other things and stuff like that. So part of me is it's about trying to broaden my interest in a way just so that I can kind of like I'm innately curious. I want to know about stuff. So
It's
and
balance, right?
right,
It's that
right, right,
balance, which
right.
we learn in Star Wars, but
Right,
it
it's
can't, like, our lives can't be just about one thing. Like, you can't, life doesn't work that way. Like, you would be missing out on something else. Like, even though you and I are here because we love Star Wars and we love the franchise, like, there's more to life than that. Yes, we can
there's
learn
a
from it, and yes, we can have, like, great experiences at Galaxy's Edge, and we can get a break and get revitalized from the stories or learn something from the stories, but at the end of the day, we still have to go out into the real world, and we still have to be around people and I mean, I guess you don't have to, but that wouldn't be a very good life, you
right,
know?
right. You know, there's so much in the world, and I think what George Lucas's original intent was to give people a break and take them back to their childhood, you know, and show them something that was inspired by the things he liked when he was a kid, you know.
Mhm.
And you know, I would think that if I ever became a storyteller or whatever, I would hope that it wouldn't be too derivative towards, you know, some of these things. But I, you know, I'm glad that I can pass off and share some of these things with my niece now and let her see some of the things that I liked when I was a child and stuff. And some of those things she likes, some of them, you know, she's wasn't too crazy about. When I was younger, I used to get picked on a lot because I had a big vocabulary.
Mhm.
And the reason I had the big vocabulary wasn't necessarily to like show off that I was smarter than anybody. It was literally because I liked watching movies and I wanted to know what the people in the movies were saying. And it was like you know, one of the movies I'm thinking about is the original Superman from 1978 because they use a lot of I mean, especially in that opening, you know, 20 minutes, they use an awful lot of big language and formal language. And even in the Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, the Empire uses a lot of really formal language. They're much more formal than, Han Solo with, his
Yeah.
all clear, kid, that type of thing. And I wanted to know what they're talking about. I mean, George, there was a famous bit there where it was either Harrison Ford or Carrie Fisher or somebody between takes told George Lucas, you can write this stuff, but you can't say it, and stuff like
Yes,
that.
I was thinking of that same thing. I was thinking, I'm sure they've all said it. I was thinking of something like, I think it was like Mark Hamill on like a late night show or something, but he was like, no one talks like this, George.
Right, right, right. He's like, you can write this shit, but you can't say it. I think it was like in between takes because I think it was Harrison because he was like had to say something that
Probably.
was like really complex or whatever. And it was like it seemed like it was like kind of like one of those moments like when they were making, I don't know if you know this story, when they were making Raiders of the Lost Ark and they're in Tunisia, and it's the scene where the guy in the comes out with the big saber and he does the flipping around and stuff like that. They did like 20 takes of this, and Harrison had dysentery at the time, and he was just bored of the whole thing, so he just whips out his gun and shoots the guy, and that's the thing they left in the movie, and it was improvised, and it was just it's those moments like that, but I always, when I was younger, I wanted to know what they were saying in the movie. So I don't want to say that I like sat and read the dictionary, like, forwards and backwards and stuff like that. But this was pre-Google. You had to,
Yeah.
now, really in this world where everybody's got a smartphone and everybody's got internet access, or at least, most of the developed world does, you know, there really is no excuse for not knowing the things you want to know because it's all out there and you can have immediate access to it.
Yeah, it's at your
And
fingertips.
right, it's completely at your fingertips. And so I think it's everybody's responsibility, I think, in their own way to figure out what kind of knowledge they want to pursue and what direction to go in and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. But, it's some of us who are lucky have had people that have, been able to motivate us and push us in that direction. Some others, have had to find their own way. But it's all out there, and it's all out there for everyone. And I want to see a world that, is more inclusive and makes I guess more people feel comfortable to be who they are. And
Yeah.
to me, that's what it is. And it's like I said earlier, the world would be a better place if people would just, generally, and I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I'm a human, I make mistakes too, but the world would be a better place if people would just be willing to meet others where they are,
Yeah.
instead of like expecting them to conform to their like sets
Whatever
of
it is.
sets of rules. Because I mean, those
Yeah.
those are those are stories that we can also take from the Star Wars movies too. I mean, there are people who see that the Jedi viewpoint as being narrow-minded and dogmatic, and in the Last Jedi they flipped the script on it and say Luke even got disillusioned by it because he realized that the whole thing was a failed sham. You know, and it's so.
And it's like, what do you do with that? I think that's the question of that movie too. Like, do you give up or do you keep fighting for something better? And like we all go through times where we do give up for a little bit. whether
Mhm.
whether it's like healthy and it's needed to take a little bit of a break or whether it is like a hiding from whatever it is that's going on, but it's like I think the choice after that is what's important. Like, do you continue to stay there or do you continue to push through that and try to make the world a better place? And I don't mean when I say make the world a better place, I don't necessarily mean that on like a scale of the world. I mean just what you can do in your sphere of influence, making that a better place. Because like we can say like, "Oh, make the world a better place," but that's like an impossible task for one person. It
Right.
can happen. There are people that have that kind of influence, but that puts a lot of expectations on people that's really hard, I think, too, because then it seems like this huge thing like, I can't change the world. You're right. Maybe we can't change the world, or maybe we can't change at one time or with one person or change, something, but I can change myself and I can try to learn and grow and become a better person and then in turn do that with one more person and then maybe that person it'll light a little spark in them to do that for themselves and then it takes time but that does make a positive difference but it's that initial choice I think of which direction are you gonna go? Are you gonna go where you stay in the place that you are? Or are you gonna accept some of the realities that you might not, like Luke had to, like, this wasn't what I thought it was. Okay, now make it what you want it to be. And I think that's such an important lesson that Star Wars teaches
That's,
you if you listen to it.
right, right. That's I mean that's the main point of it is you have to get the most out of it. It's not just about like, you know, what what part of the story has the best literal connection to everything else that came before it. I think the main part of it is what does the spirit of it tell you? What is the theme of it? I don't always agree with what Roger Ebert said in his movie reviews, but he always said, it's not what a movie is about that's important. It's how it's about it. And so it's like you said, and I was just thinking about that individually making a change. That was always a big thing. I'm a huge fan of Michael Jackson, and of course, Man in the Mirror was one of his biggest hits, and he that was the basically the theme of that song was, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. And that's it's
Yeah.
it, it, the song doesn't ask you to act on a global level. It's about being an individual and being able um to do for yourself, or I guess do good for others, the best way that you can for yourself, or whatever, and still, do good for yourself too. But um it's about making that individual impact, as opposed to, like, not everybody can be a global philanthropist. We don't all have billions of dollars. Even the people who have billions of dollars aren't spending it on um they're spending it on yachts and ridiculous space flights for only rich people and stuff like that, and they're not doing it for the betterment of science. And so
Yeah.
for the little person to look at the world or whatever in that way and see that, well, I'm not rich, so I can't really do anything. You can do it. What you can do, though, is you could try to be the best person that you can be for yourself, for your family, for your friends. Get involved. I feel like hopefully, if I can have one person listen to this podcast with you and me, and take out of it even just like one shred of anything, it's that if you are hurting, if you feel like the world doesn't want you here, or whatever they do, there's a place for you and you can find it. It's just, you may need to get professional help or something like
Mhm.
that, but there are resources out there, even if you can't necessarily afford it. There are people they're more than willing to help you out. It's just that you have to want it for yourself. And it's
Yeah.
that's the most important part. It's, is the wanting it for yourself, because nobody can chase you directly into it. Nobody can push you, and even if you were pushed into it or whatever, most people that are pushed into things wouldn't wouldn't do it if they could. Or
Yeah,
you know
even, like I've said before on here and to people too, like I've taken medicine. I'm not against taking medicine, but like even medicine in itself isn't going to fix you. Even seeing maybe the best therapist isn't going to fix you. Like you have to do the work. You have to put in the time to make those changes. Like you could pay for the most expensive person, to talk to that has like the best degrees or expertise or whatever. But if you aren't honest and you aren't willing to actually listen and work on yourself, then it's not really going to do much of anything. So I think that's like what you said too though is so important about people not feeling alone and people feeling like there's a place they can come to, and that, you know, it doesn't have to be a big goal of changing the entire world. It just can be a little change or a little impact that can make a big difference. And so I
Which
think all those things that you just said are really important.
Yeah, but like I said, you gotta want it. And
Yeah.
I got another story about this. I do have to tell you because I think it's a really important thing that I need to share with people about this.
Yeah.
I mean, just the advocacy part. When I was growing up, I had some problems in school. I was, when I was 15 was a terrible year for me. I've had a few like really, really bad years growing up. I think 11 was bad, 15 was bad. There were a couple of other ones that were there. I've sort of tried my best to exercise those demons with the help of my therapist and with journaling and writing unsent letters and all of those things that my therapist, mentioned that I should do. But when I was 15 years old, I had one too many bad days at school. I had a teacher who didn't necessarily, a language arts teacher who didn't necessarily know what to do with me. And she referred me to the school psychologist. And at 15 years old, I was just like, seriously, I'm not a danger to anybody. This is pre-Columbine. So, I mean, they weren't necessarily thinking that I was like, going to do something rash. Being a pacifist, I wouldn't resort to violence, but um I it was one of those things where the teacher probably thought that I was on drugs or something like that. She sent me to the school psychologist. They pulled me out of art class, which I was already, behind in on my projects. And they started asking me a bunch of questions. The first thing they asked me was, "Are you on drugs?" This and that and the other thing. I realized that that was probably part of their protocol. They had to do it. They were just doing their job. But for years after that, I I had this suspicion and this feeling that professional help was for people who like were sent there because somebody was out to get them, and it was a punitive as opposed to like asking somebody for help, like like going to a consultant for help. But now I realize it's just like going to a doctor's office for having a sinus infection, or you know going to have something checked out because they suspect it's cancer or something like that. It's information that is there to help you out. But when I was 15, I didn't trust it. And for a long time, until I went to therapy and like actually went through the process, I was in denial of the anxiety that I had and all this stuff. Then again, I was told by people when I was younger, just brush it off. The only people who actually need help are the ones who need to be wearing a straitjacket and go to a room.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was taught when I was younger. And really, for a while there, it really prejudiced me against mental health advocacy and advocating for yourself. And after having gone to therapy and putting myself in it, after having, one too many bad days at work when I was in my 40s, I finally had the courage to say, look, this has to end. I'm wanting to take the steps to understand myself better and to rid myself of this problem. Can you help me? And with the aid of putting me on some medication and
Yeah.
going to therapy every couple of weeks, and spending those hours with my therapist talking about all the things that it's not just about stuff that's going on today. A lot of it is the deep-seated trauma and stuff like that that I dealt with when I was younger. I told my therapist this. I feel like you are teaching me how to use the force. Not necessarily, in the mind over matter sense. It's about the mindfulness. And it's about
Hmm.
being able to live in the moment and pay attention and shut out the dark side. And that's an analogy she really appreciated, because my therapist also is a big Star Wars fan and understands all of my references, which makes it a lot easier when when we talk about stuff or whatever. And if I drop a clue in like that, heck, we
Yeah.
had a session yesterday afternoon, and right after I got back from vacation, and I mean, we didn't really talk about traumatic stuff. It was all pretty positive. We talked a lot about traveling and the stress of traveling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's really beneficial, even when you're not having the worst, even when you're not having the worst week and stuff like that, just to have that checkup and make sure that that you can have a confidential talk with somebody, and they have a responsibility to keep that stuff to them, between you and them. And
Yeah.
it's such a powerful thing. It's been a powerful thing for me for a year. I'm a big believer in it, but at the same time, you can't force anybody into it. They have to want it for
Right. Yeah.
themselves. It's the
Yeah.
number one. It's like the first lesson I learned in all of this is, number one, a lot of the stuff that went on that I dealt with and all that stuff, I had to let go of and realize it wasn't my fault, you know and I have to stop blaming myself for things that I was blaming myself for, just because, when you're younger and you're brought up in an environment like mine, I felt like I was like kind of taught to beat myself up about it and just feel guilty for um being me. And
Yeah.
now I'm starting to feel like it's I'm 46 years old. My give a fucks are spent. I'm sorry I use that word, but it's that it's you know it, it's I'm now getting to the point where I'm realizing that I've got less than half of my life left, statistically speaking, and
Yeah.
I don't want to walk around feeling miserable. It's not that my entire childhood was miserable, but I went through enough misery when I was younger, and enough feeling uncomfortable and not feeling worthy, and it wasn't so much to make me feel like my childhood was ruined or anything like that, but it was enough to like make me not want to think about certain things that happened when I was younger and stuff like that, just
Yeah.
because I had to learn to let a lot of things go in
Yeah.
and to be more forgiving. And I had to realize that for me, going through therapy, forgiveness isn't about saying that something was okay that it happened. It's not about that at all. It's about not letting that stuff live rent free in your head forever.
Right.
And so there are ways that you can, I mean, there are boundaries that I've set with former friends that I just don't talk to anymore, just because they didn't respect mine. And it's
And as a recovering people pleaser, it's hard to do that.
it is it is, but eventually you know you have to learn to do what's right for yourself. And that's what, when I say doing what's right for yourself, it's not about like butting in line and pushing people out of the way and stuff like that, but it's just about like not letting people run you under their wheels, and they will do it. I
Right.
mean, there's certain people who pick out the people pleasers, and they will
Yeah.
they will certainly do that. They will take advantage of you. They will suck the life out of you if you let them.
Mhm.
And so for
Mhm.
me, it was about learning not to allow that. And part of that
Right.
is sometimes you have to make tough choices. You have to cut people off,
Yeah.
and you have to learn to advocate for yourself if you couldn't do it before. Because in those situations, you could easily get pushed into a spot where people will figure out how to take advantage of your good judgments and use you for the dark side. I mean,
Yeah, I
it
get it. It's why I think I resonated so much more with Ahsoka as an adult, because I'm going through a similar journey in learning boundaries and not being a people pleaser, and that people can take like advantage of you. Like I've felt my friendship has been taken advantage of like throughout my life, and I just didn't really know what to do with it. And I think as an adult, looking at, as silly as it seems, a fictional character who was also very kind and very caring and a helper like me walk away from the Jedi Order. Like that was really powerful for me to see, as even as an adult, even though it's an animated show and even though it's a fictional story and not real, it still was like helpful for me to see a character that I respected and also could see myself in, and her standing up for herself and saying like, I'm sorry, but this isn't healthy for me anymore. Like I can't do this. Like I need to go out on my own and figure this out. And she still holds true to herself, like those core beliefs that were important to her, but she did it without being around people that didn't really have her back, honestly. And so, yeah, I feel you. And again, not trying to be cheesy and bring bring that up, but like it's just it is such a hard thing and it's such an important thing to learn, but it is very hard.
It is, people pleasing is a really hard thing to break out of. It's one of those things when it's ingrained in you and you're not really taught. You have to I guess, learn the difference between having a big ego and having positive self-esteem. I think there's a real thin line there. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that cross that. But I think part of having good positive self-esteem is being able to set up boundaries and say, nope, I can't do it. And it's not that I'm, trying to be mean or anything like that. It's that I need to preserve my energy, you know,
Yeah.
so that I can do well for myself and for, for others too. I'm not just looking out for myself. I'm looking out for, my parents, my sister, my niece, everybody that's close to
Right.
my circle. And it's not necessarily
Right.
that I'm providing for all these people because they're well capable of doing it for themselves. It's that you have to have that energy to be there for them and to be a contributing member to your family. And if you're miserable all the time, nobody wants to be around a miserable person. I certainly
Yeah.
don't. I don't have
I
the
mean,
energy
I've had
for it.
to change careers because all of my energy went into that instead of my relationship or my close friends or my family. Like my relationship was suffering because all of my energy and time and effort went into that instead of what really mattered, instead
Right.
of like home.
It can be tough, and there are people out there who just don't
Yeah.
respect the boundaries. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons why I have had the level of anxiety at my job this time, going back to about 15, or actually it was, yeah, um, about 15 years ago, a little longer. I had a job where I was working in a call center, and basically they'd put us on a call intake system that hadn't been completely tested out. They spent like a year on this project, and they were like, by hook or by crook, we're going live with it. And when they went live with it, they had hold times of like an hour and a half. They had people that were just like absolutely angry when you talk to him on the phone, and I was just tired of talking to angry people. And I ended up getting a very visceral like reaction from this, because when I would hear the phone ring in a professional sense, I was automatically wondering if I was going to get yelled at because I didn't pick it up fast enough. And that
Yeah.
stretched over.
Yeah.
I went for a lot of years without having to deal with that because I wasn't put back into that situation. And then I was
Yeah.
suddenly in that situation, and I was doing call center work for the first time in forever. I promised myself that I wouldn't do it, but I got myself into a situation where I was either that or, change careers. And I did it for a year, and that's why I ended up in therapy. When I really had the anxiety problems or whatever I had a couple of really rough nights where I couldn't hardly sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night screaming and crying because I was just overwhelmed by everything. And it um just not being able to get that nightly relief. I was waking up in the morning for a few days. I would wake up just absolutely tired. And it was all about having to push myself through to the next day, or I should say to bedtime, and then hope that I would get the relief that I wanted. And
Yeah.
it was always that like toss of the dice, and the flip of the coin. Is it going to come tonight, or am I going to have to wait for that relief? And eventually it got so bad that, the night after I had one of the bad nights, I talked to my boss at work, told him I was going to the doctor, and I pretty soon I was in the doctor's office or whatever, and they were diagnosing me with anxiety and depression. And it was something that I knew was going on, but it was a hard thing for me to accept because you have that, um, especially as a male, you have this ingrained, some maybe sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious feeling that you're supposed to, like, you always hear about guys getting the man flu, like they're over exaggerating their symptoms or this or that or the thing or
Yeah,
whatever. But some people may listen to this and they feel like they're like better adjusted or whatever and stuff like that, and they've never been through situations like this before. What they don't realize is that, you know, I'm I'm not doing this to be like, I'm not going after help to be performative or to try to, it's not, this is not a show. We talked about a lot
right,
of stuff in the world that is a show. It's information about yourself that you need to be able to survive. And
right.
if you don't do it for yourself and you're in a situation where you feel like you're constantly stressed out, it can and does have physical, like
Hmm.
serious physical effects that will cause problems. And the thing is, you can't be a contributing member of society or a contributing member to your family or any of that stuff if you're, sitting in a hospital because you had a heart attack,
Right.
you know?
And that's why I try to be so mindful as much as I can. Because, like you said too, like I'm also a human and I make mistakes and I don't do everything right. So I don't say this from a place of like I've got it figured out. But like I try to remember when I'm talking to someone, whether online or in person, that you don't know what they're going through behind closed doors. And you don't know if they say something mean. I mean, it can be just someone not responding to you in the way that you expect, or it could be someone saying something mean about what you like in Star Wars. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And you don't know what you're saying to someone, what that person, what they're going through. And also, when you respond to that person on the flip side, you also don't know what that other person is going through. And so that's why I try to be so careful with what I say, especially online, because I don't know. I know at the end of the day, like you're responsible for yourself and like your choices in life. And not that like you're responsible if someone makes a bad choice, but I don't want to be responsible for saying something flippantly that hurts somebody that's already like, even if they're not hurting, I don't want to hurt somebody, but let's say they're hurting in this way
Mm-hmm.
that you and I understand, that just adds fuel to that fire. And like people die because of things that are said online
Mm-hmm.
and how they're bullied and how things are handled. And that's serious. And I don't think people think about that sometimes when you just fire off something or you say something even in person to somebody. Like we're all real people that have real things that are going on and we have real struggles. And so one, I try to give grace to people that might be coming across rude because I have this, it's not really like a mantra, but it's like a saying that I keep saying over and over again lately, that like hurt people hurt people. And so when someone is saying something hurtful, I try to look at it as they are hurting. And instead of me responding hurt, I'm going to try to respond in a way that I would want to be responded to if I was that hurting person. And I just really hope that that's something that we can learn in this fandom. And I really do think that Star Wars, in its stories, has such good lessons and good reminders for us, like in our daily life and how to treat each other. And I just really hope that we can listen to that and we can learn from that. And then we can, in turn, try to create some light and some hope and change in someone's life in the real world through that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I hope that I hope that in doing this, and I hope that enough people listen to what we've just talked about in the last couple of hours here about, trying to at least, inspire change locally. I mean, if not on a global level. I don't have to tell anybody who's been paying attention to these stories what they mean or anything like that. But the main part of the first one of A New Hope is about, Luke was, living a pretty sheltered life on that rock far away, and he was told by his uncle that there was no changing what was going on in the world, and you just had to, accept it. And he had that mentality until something, until basically his aunt and uncle were were roasted by the stormtroopers, and pretty soon he didn't have the convenience of, not caring anymore. Suddenly the war came to him, and he had to do something about it. It was about learning to care for something bigger than yourself. He learned the ways of the Force and became a Jedi Knight like his father, and helped to turn his father good and all of that, and so on and so forth. But we don't have to necessarily even perform a miracle like that to be a good person in this life. All it takes really is just to, like I said a couple of times here, just try to meet people where they're at, and
Yeah.
see it through their eyes, and hope that the lessons that are being taught in these films are not being done it's not going in vain. There really is
Mhm.
good meaning to be pulled from this, and people can really, I think, learn to be motivated to be good people just from characters like Yoda. And I mean, they've everybody makes a bad choice once in a while. Even Yoda would admit that, he's not perfect, but,
Yeah.
it's about admitting your shortcomings, and still at least trying to do good by other people. That's, to me,
Right.
that's the lure of it, and what makes these stories so powerful.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, I think that's such a good take on it too. Like it is important, and I think Yoda did learn too that he, like, he's not perfect. Things happen, mistakes happen, and it's what you do with that and how you move forward, and how you move on in a positive and healthier way, and know that I might make another mistake, or it might not be perfect like while I'm going in this direction, but I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to try again. And so yeah, I think those are very important reminders and good things that we can learn, and I hope everybody does listen and hear like where you're coming from in your story, and learns from that too. So thank you so much for being open and coming on here, and I know it can be kind of scary to talk about things, and to talk about our lives and what we've gone through, but like you said, if just one person listens and it helps them, then I think it's I think it's definitely worth it too. So,
Well,
and
thank you for having me on. This was
yeah.
it was not just I guess a cathartic experience to talk about this, but it was also enlightening. It's great to be a participating member of, the Star Wars fandom, and to talk about
Yeah.
things in such a positive way, and not, necessarily be judged for your opinions and stuff like that. It's great. I do have I've one parting thought for people who
Yeah.
are going through this. It goes along with what you were saying before, and that is, I think, the path to knowledge, one of the first step of it is admitting that you don't know everything. Because
Yeah.
if you want to learn more about, whether it's about yourself, whether it's about things that are going on in the world, whether it's how to do something, or how to whatever, um or even if it's just about, trying to be a better person, the path to knowledge is knowing that you are not the be all and end all expert of anything, and anybody who and always to beware of someone who says that, because
Yeah.
those people in many cases are not to be trusted. The person who doesn't have the humility to say, I don't necessarily know the exact answer, but I'm willing to help you figure it out. That's a lot better than
Yeah.
somebody saying, I know everything, you should only listen to me. That's the path.
Very true.
That's the gateway to disaster, you know?
Yeah.
And if you don't like the opinion you got previously, there are plenty of second opinions. Just don't go on Reddit asking for it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So that is true. I
it's
mean,
that's but
it's true.
that's what it is. Is it's the pathway. Like I said, the gateway to knowledge is admitting, number one, admitting that you don't know everything, but that you're willing to really put in the effort and put in the work. It's just like personal growth. It's just like mental health or anything like that. But you got to do the work for yourself, and
Yes.
you got to, but it sure does help when you got a lot of other people in your corner that are standing up. And I hope that
Yes.
when this recording gets published, that enough of those people listen to it, and put in the time to sit and listen to what we've had to say, because I think we
Yeah.
really did have a good conversation.
Yeah. It's so important. And I know in like May, it's very focused on May the 4th and it's Star Wars Day and all the fun Star Wars things. But with it also being like Mental Health Awareness Month, and that being part of my journey and like important to me, I really wanted to focus on that because I think Star Wars does deal with mental health, and Lucas was very much inspired by psychology. And so I think there is a component to Star Wars that talks about that in its own way. And so thank you for being a part of that and for sharing your journey. And I'm kind of asking people at the end kind of a fun question that it's Star Wars related, but it's just kind of random. It's kind of fun.
Hmm.
And I kind of wait to the end to like fully decide what I'm going to ask, because everybody, it's like some of them are similar and some of them are like the same.
Hmm.
So, since you love Galaxy's Edge and you love rides and you love all of that, I can assume too that you also like droids.
Hmm.
Okay. If you could have a droid in Star Wars be your best friend, which droid would you pick?
Oh man, I would probably pick 3PO. Just because R2 talks to you in beeps and boops and stuff like that. um I I think 3PO and I would get along very well, because we both have like crippling anxiety sometimes, and stuff like that. His personality is very geared towards me. I think if had he been like George Lucas's original idea, where he was supposed to be like this fast talking used car salesman, I might find him obnoxious. But for me, 3PO is one of my favorite characters in all of it, because even though he's a robot, he has real genuine feelings like a person, and people genuinely love him. I mean, he's a piece of hardware. He's got programming and stuff like that, but he's responsible for some of the funniest moments in the
Yes,
entire.
I love
He's
the
he's
humor.
hilarious. Even when they wipe his memory in Boba Frick's room and he speaks Sith for a couple of seconds. But yeah, I think if it was anybody, it would be 3PO, because I think
I think that's a solid choice. And
yeah,
3PO could go on rides
yeah.
because, he has legs
Well,
and a body.
shoot, he drives the rides. I mean, like on Star Tours, he was the pilot.
Yes.
It's like, um,
Oh, I love 3PO so much.
yeah, I do too. Yeah, it was
Well,
just,
I think that's a great pick.
yeah, it was really fun doing this. I hope that people got, whoever listens to this, got at least one good thing out of it. And I hope that, if
Yeah.
somebody who is on the edge or needed some help, might have gotten some encouragement, because like I said, I didn't trust therapists or psychologists or anything like that before I actually went. And if you find the right person who can help you out,
Yeah,
it can really make a world of difference, but you got to want it for
it
yourself.
can.
And that's
It
the
can.
main
It definitely
it's the
can.
main message. But, you know, I'm all about, for me, coming on here and talking about this and being so open about it. It's about, for me, breaking the stigma, because I know there's a
Mhm.
lot of folks out there who just don't feel like they can come out and talk about, like, honestly and soberly about themselves and how they feel, because they've always been, some people have just been trained to keep a stiff upper lip, and
Yeah,
it's a hard training to break.
it
So,
is.
if you feel like you're in that situation and you're out there listening, know that it's not just me, and it's not just my new friend Jessica here. It is about, it is about, um other people who have been in your spot, and we all understand what you're going through. We all do.
Yeah, you're not alone.
You are not alone, and you are very wanted in this world. This world is big enough for all of us to enjoy. And if there's one thing that you can take away from Disney World and all that stuff, it's going to sound super corny. It's a small world after all. It's what it is.
Yes, it's very true. It's very true. Well, thank you, Adam, so much
Oh,
for coming on and sharing your story. I've really enjoyed it, and I have definitely learned something and have been inspired too. And I know someone else listening will be. So
I
I
think
really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm so glad we spent these couple of hours together. It was really enlightening, and really just, it was a whole lot of fun. So thank you very much.
Yes. It was. It was a lot of fun. Thank you. Thanks for joining me today on Tales of the Force. Our stories of hope is the force of this fandom, and they are a powerful ally to each and every one of us. Life creates them, makes them grow. Their energy surrounds us and binds us together. Don't forget, luminous beings we all are, not this crude matter. May the Force be with you always.